energy. The summit is a testament to our shared belief in the importance of that kind of collaboration. And I want to thank all of our partners, including everyone who is part of the Global Renewable Alliance. And let me once again thank all of you for joining us today and for all you're doing to keep us moving forward. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, one of the world's most influential leaders and a trailblazer too, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and she was the first woman to be elected to the presidency. Should know she became the first person ever to be re-elected to the presidency, and no wonder because she's done a great job. She's been a steady hand helping to Europe through many difficult challenges, from the pandemic to the invasion of the Ukraine and the energy crisis that it caused. She's been a champion for trade and economic cooperation at a time of increased protectionism, and she's been instrumental to Europe's continuing leadership on climate change. She is an outstanding partner to countries around the world making to achieve ambitious goals for clean energy development and grow their economies at the same time. In 2023, she called on world leaders to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency, which helped set the stage for the historic commitments made at COP28. She's also been an important partner to Bloomberg Philanthropies through the Global Covenant of Mayors, the initiative that we run with the European Commission, which is helping more than 13,000 cities design local climate action plans. So we're great and glad to have her with us. Please join me in welcoming Ursula to the stage. Ursula?
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, it all started in March 2023 with an idea. It was the idea, or rather the vision together with the International Energy Agency, of a global movement that would help us stay within the 1.5 degrees Celsius and push the clean energy transition forward. So we proposed global targets to triple renewables and to double energy savings by 2030. We wanted quantifiable targets, because only what it measures gets done. And at COP28, the world rallied behind this goal thanks to a coalition of 135 countries and thanks to the leadership of a core group of motivated partners. I'm very happy to see many of them here today. Dear Sultan Al Jaber as COP28 President, dear President Ruto, dear Prime Minister Motley, together we succeeded in turning the idea into a common goal, and I really thank you for the excellent cooperation that was out there. It was one of these rare moments where you had the impression the world feels united as one. It has even been called the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. And today we must keep this spirit alive, the spirit of COP28. And for this, we must double down on implementation collectively to reach these targets. I see 4 areas of action. First is planning. The second and the third, the fourth, I'll allude in a moment, but let's have a look at what the government should do. Governments should now integrate our global ambition in their national climate plans, showing how they intend to contribute to the global targets in the current decade. And that's what we're doing now in the European Union. We raised our renewable energy target for 2030 to more than 42% of our mix, and we're getting there. In the first half of this year, 50% of our electricity generation came from renewables, 50%. But we also know, of course, that the work is far from being done. And this leads me to my second point. We need to improve the business environment. We must create the right incentives and conditions for clean energy tech to thrive. And we all know what is needed in Europe and what is needed globally. First, a solid regulatory framework so that investments are safe and secure. Second, state-of-the-art infrastructure and faster permitting procedures. The permitting procedures are too slow. We have to get fast on that one. Third, lead markets that create demand for sustainable products, services and technologies. And finally, we need the right skills to match the demand. So we must work on all these priorities at once. This is what I have set to do with my new Commission, now with a new mandate from 2024 to 2029, and we are ready to work on this with our international partners. My third point is on access and supply of critical raw materials. Working towards our targets will increase the demand for these minerals, and we must make sure that sourcing and mining are done in a way that benefits all, in a sustainable way. And this is why the Secretary General's panel on critical energy transition minerals has my full support. As co-chairs of the panel, we will continue working for robust supply chains, diversified supply chains that are transparent, sustainable, and fair throughout. And my final point is on investments. The clean energy transition requires massive investments everywhere in the world. And this is especially true of countries and regions where there is a lack of affordable energy and capital, and where costs are so high that it is an obstacle to electrification. Yes, we need public finance. It will play a crucial role in pushing the clean energy transition forward. Europe will keep doing its fair share. In 2022, with our Global Engagement Investment Strategy, Team Europe mobilized 28 billion euros in public funding to support emerging countries in reducing emissions and adapt to climate change. We do not only provide grants, we also use European public funds to de-risk investments and have a multiplier effect. Because it is very clear that public funding won't be enough to achieve our global goals. We need to start aligning all global financial flows with the Paris Agreement. And this means mobilizing private capital too. And we can help in doing that. Because when we, as governments or international organizations, set global targets for renewables, we also set the future course for business as well. It's the clear direction of travel. When we develop de-risking instruments, we strengthen the business case for clean investments. And when we give public support to breakthrough innovation, we facilitate their uptake in the market. And I'm sure that representatives of the private sector are also ready to embark on this journey. So my basic call is, let's gear up towards COP29. It will be the place and the time to showcase new products, new projects that support our targets, show the ambition. Let us fill the global pledges with life. I thank you for your attention.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the President of Kenya, William Ruto. As President of one of Africa's largest economies, his leadership is critical, and he has been one of the world's strongest voices for action on climate change. Last year, he hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where a total of $23 billion was committed towards projects to stem climate change across the continent. At COP28, he announced an ambitious initiative to speed up clean energy investment in Africa and to cut emissions from heavy industries. Kenya, you should know, already has one of the world's cleanest electrical grids, and President Ruto has pledged to achieve 100% clean energy by 2030. And that sets an example, a great example for countries across Africa and around the world. So I want to thank him for all his leadership, and we are honored to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming President Ruto.
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to co-host this Global Renewables Summit with a group of like-minded partners. This is a timely and consequential event as we seek to translate a big vision into action. We made significant progress at COP28 under the leadership of my brother here from the UAE, notably with a commitment to triple global renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030. Last year's inaugural Africa Climate Summit was an important step towards COP28. African heads of state adopted the Nairobi Declaration with climate-positive growth as a new paradigm for industrialization and development. A key pillar of this future is Africa's vast and underutilized renewable energy resources. In this room, we know the reality of a global disparity in energy access. Nearly 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, while another 1 billion are without clean cooking options. In sub-Saharan Africa, annual energy access gains of around 30 million people barely keep pace with a population growth of 28 million people each year. So you balance the number of people that are coming into the space with those that are getting electricity, it means we are running on a treadmill. This trend imperils progress across the entire Sustainable Development Goals on agenda and also imperils our Paris Agreement goals. This week, we adopted the Pact of the Future to improve our world. It requires our commitment to implement and realize the ambitions of the Pact. We will continue to push for a course correction of the global financial and investment gaps and the unfair financial systems. Africa receives less than 2%, sometimes it's say 3%, of global investment in renewable energy, despite being home to 60% of the world's best solar opportunities. Last year, the continent added less than 3 gigawatts of renewable energy, while the world saw a record addition of nearly 500 gigawatts. So, 3 gigawatts with a potential of 60%. That tells you the disparity. Africa must pursue industrialization and economic growth to tackle the crippling energy poverty. Although the continent is resource-rich, unreliable or expensive energy limits our ability to harness these resources for development. High capital costs and economies of scale mean that investors require secure offtake agreements as a mechanism of de-risking their investment. Establishing anchor industrial demand driven by energy-intensive industries is crucial for securing these investments. We have a significant opportunity as the world to seek and expand and diversify value chains, particularly for energy transition. However, not all industrial development is beneficial. Historically, exploitation of Africa's resources has not yielded benefits for its people. We must avoid repeating these mistakes of the past. And that is why we have made a decision as African heads of state to re-engineer the African Union. I have been mandated by my colleagues to reform the institutions of the African Union so that we can make it fit for purpose, give ourselves voice, and do the right things to attract investment in spaces that are important, as in climate action. This is why I am also driving the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, which we launched at COP28, and now advancing with a group of global leaders this week. Expanding energy is critical for Africa Green Industrialization Initiative's agenda. Next month, together with IRENA, we are hosting the first accelerated partnership for renewables in Africa. That forum in Nairobi, and we look forward to hosting many of you. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our discussion on mobilizing finance, it is also important that we keep this approach in mind and focus on both supply of and demand for renewable energy at the forefront. By doing so, we can unlock ideas, partnerships, and approaches expanding our range of solutions. With Africa's unmatched climate competitiveness, we can offer global solutions that grow our economies, create jobs, and dignified livelihoods. We can generate healthy financial returns. Let me repeat that. We can generate healthy financial returns. I know there are people here listening. But we need systems and tools that truly work for Africa and, by extension, for the world. The world has the means and technologies needed to achieve the tripling goal by 2030. But there are numerous pathways to reach this target. Without a deliberate, a disciplined, and honest approach, the development divide may widen. The power of choice is in our hands, literally and figuratively. Let's wield it wisely and make it count. I thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. In addition to collaborating on climate change, we work together on a task force that is taking action to reduce deaths from non-communicable diseases like heart diseases and diabetes. And just this morning, we announced a new report at an event here at the Plaza. She's also been a powerful advocate for clean energy and for island nations and developing countries that are on the front lines of climate change. Through the Bridgetown Initiative, she has pushed for reforms to development banks to help fill the financial gaps in developing countries. She's also leading by example by putting Barbados on track to phase out all fossil fuels by 2030. So I want to thank her for all of her leadership and partnership. Please join me in welcoming Prime Minister Mottley.
Thank you very much, Mike. To my dear brother, President Ruto, President von der Leyen, Sultan Al-Jaber, our new president of COP29, let me say how pleased I am to be here to speak this morning on this Global Renewables Summit. But I'm going to ask us to pause a minute, because at the same time that we are speeding towards this target, we have the reality of a doubling of fossil fuel subsidies. And at the same time, those fossil fuel subsidies are 10 times that which exists for renewable energy. Equally, in small states, we face the reality that the cost of renewable energy supply and electricity to our citizens will probably be higher than the traditional use of fossil fuels. It therefore means that we need to have some difficult conversations that really ought now to be put on the table. We have a deficit in terms of capacity, particularly as it relates to regulation. Ursula, one of the things that you insisted on in your speech was that the regulatory framework is critical to our being able to reach the target. Permitting is critical. But most small states don't have the level of skills necessary to create that regulatory framework easily. So while we speak to the urgent need for financing as we continue to do with the Bridgetown Initiative, and while we push for greater amounts to be applied there, not just of public money, but of other money and public-private approaches, we have to also come to grips with the reality that there are some non-financial issues that can also undermine our ability to reach this target. The absence of that capacity within the framework of regulation is one. The second one, and Sultan, I think we have spoken about this in the past, relates to the procurement. We learned in COVID very easily, if we ever forgot it, that we were small. Because the orders that we will place will not even attract the attention of those who want to just clean up the storerooms. Our orders, therefore, will have to find a mechanism for pooled procurement if we are going to be serious about allowing small states to reach the objective of wanting to phase out fossil fuels and wanting to increase our reliance on renewable energy. But it's not just the pooled procurement. We may have to look also at pooled investment in regions. The reality is that in the Caribbean, there are certain countries that would like to move faster, but we have the opportunity for significant capacity in solar, wind, geothermal, and a number of other renewables. Bottom line is, however, that each investment will probably not attract any attention from you, Mike, because it's probably too small. But if we take the investments and pool them collectively and look for collective offtake agreements, then perhaps we can begin to catapult the level of speed that we need in order to reach 2030. Forgive me if I have spoken about these practical matters this morning, but if we are serious about reaching the 2030 agreement, the targets for 2030, then we have to be practical with respect to these other issues. I come now, before I close, to the issue of financing. We cannot continue to believe that money is just going to come out of the air. It is not. And while we accept that there has to be far greater utilization of domestic financing than has been discussed thus far, the reality is that it is the partnership between foreign and domestic capital that is going to get us there. Most of our countries are borrowing at rates that are just not sustainable. And that is why the JETB projects, wonderfully announced in Glasgow, really have not gotten off the ground with the pace that we expected it to. I want to salute President Banga from the World Bank for agreeing to introduce more 50-year loans for climate vulnerable countries to be able to help us get part of the way. I want to salute Kristalina for introducing the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, which allows many of us to be able to start to plan out our way. But even then, it is limited. And in our own case in Barbados, we've used a significant portion of those funds to partner with the Latin American Development Bank, the Green Climate Fund, the United States USAID, and indeed Guyana and Bahamas, to be able to establish for the first time a blue-green investment bank in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean that will be a market maker to help close the gap with respect to some of the financing. But even with those things that I've called out and congratulated those persons, we are still not anywhere near where we need to be. In Paris last year at the Paris Pact for People and Planet, we discussed, William, the fact that we are not making sufficient pace. We're not moving with sufficient speed, and we are not moving on a broad enough front. Sultan, you have been able to add significantly to the global financing with the establishment of Altera. But the reality is that we are not yet near there. And my fear is that we say the same thing year after year after year, but the only difference is that the temperature keeps getting higher and higher, and the consequences of our failure to act with speed become real in so many parts of the world that have not yet hitherto been exposed to it. We have a moral obligation to get the financing right. And the next day, we will put out Bridgetown 3.0, which takes into account the progress we've made, but sets clearly still the ambitions that we must reach if we are going to be serious about enabling persons to reach the targets for the global renewable summits, while at the same time not forgetting that the broad sustainable development goals must be our target, because we are not one-issue people. We might end up saving ourselves from doom from the planet, but then dying from something else, like chronic non-communicable diseases that have overtaken our populations. So what is important is a holistic approach to finance, holistic approach to project preparation and project execution. I started with the regulatory and the procurement and the investment, because too often people believe that finance is the destination. And because we have spent so much time on the Bridgetown initiative, I know that we may have contributed to that, because finance is one of the biggest issues, but it is not the only issue. And settling and solving the finance will not cause our citizens to be able to benefit from renewable energy tomorrow, because there is still a project preparation and a project execution capacity that Ursula referred to so appropriately. I hope, Mike, that this ability to bring us together, using your convening power to be able to have persons to apply their hearts and minds to these difficult and complex challenges, will mean that small island states will not be omitted from the preparation and the investment that can take place. We are often ignored because our scale is simply too small. But may I remind you that small can also be dangerous. And the most dangerous animal known to all of us, or living organism known to all of us, is a mosquito. And therefore, we ought not to ignore what potentially can be done across 1/4 of the world's states that actually are small island states today. Part of the difficulty is the duplicity of policy and the duplicity of approach. I say so not proudly, but recognizing that if I want to do carbon credits in Guyana, I will get probably 1/10 of what I could get in Europe for them. There has to be a better approach to build trust across the world on so many of these issues. If we can make progress on these multiple fronts, then we will come to be successful in 2030. If we don't, then we are going to pay the price of failure. And those who pay the price perhaps are not in this room. They're the people whose voices and whose faces are not heard and not seen respectively. And our solemn obligation as leaders here is to ensure that they are not going to be put on the front line of either our failure to alter the status quo or to summon the courage to make the changes that are necessary at this most pivotal time in the world's history. I am here because I believe we can do it. I am here because I have confidence in the fact that this pathway creates jobs, creates opportunities, and ultimately secures hope at the very time when the world needs hope more than ever. I thank you, therefore, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you, recognizing, however, our limitations as small states, and hoping that the partnerships will not only be in public and private sector for large countries, but also for small states. And I make one last point. If we don't find mechanisms as well to tap into the domestic capital so that they become owners of what we will bring about with this green transition, we will turn people who live as proud, independent citizens into tenants in their own land again. We have not set on this journey to recolonize our people, but in fact to liberate them from a planet that is effectively in great crisis. Let us therefore do the right thing, but see people and hear people so that they can be part and parcel of the solution the world over. Thank you.
When the Secretary General of the United Nations called and told me that he had selected one of the largest oil exporters in the world as the host country for COP28, I thought he was what we in New York would call a little bit mashugad. That means crazy for those of you that don't live here. But he did, and he picked somebody, the country picked somebody to represent them and do the job of pulling it all together as the president of COP28, and that person is Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber. Under his leadership, last year's COP led to unprecedented commitments on clean energy, methane, heavy industry, and other critical pieces in the battle against climate change. COP28, you should know, was also the first UN climate conference to have an official summit for cities, states, and regions where the people live. This was an important step forward, and Dr. Sultan deserves a lot of credit for helping to make it possible. Together, we hosted the Local Climate Action Summit, which highlighted the work mayors and other local leaders are doing, and the need for greater partnership across all levels of government. And now he's been working closely with the leaders of the next two COP conferences to ensure that they build on momentum from Dubai and help fulfill the commitment we made there. He's become a good friend of mine. We were lucky to have him, and we're looking forward to the help from him for a lot of things going forward. Please welcome Dr. Sultan.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your kind introduction. And I must say that the success that was achieved at COP28 was due to the fact that we had adopted a completely different approach, an approach that was centered around inclusivity, and an approach that have allowed for everyone to participate, and it also provided a platform for the world to unite, to act, and to deliver. And it was that platform that have enabled me to prove the skeptics wrong and to inspire the optimists and who were really genuine in helping advance our efforts in achieving such an unprecedented result at COP28. Allow me to use this opportunity to acknowledge everyone here in this room and beyond for your contributions and for your support and for your guidance throughout the preparations and the lead-up to COP28. Without your support, without your guidance, it would not have been possible for us to achieve such an unprecedented outcome at COP28. Let me also use this opportunity to recognize our partners in this very important event, and in particular here the EU Commission, Barbados, the governments of Brazil, Kenya, the COP29 presidency, and many other organizations that have contributed immensely to the success and the progress made thus far. The theme of this summit, driving action to triple renewable energy, could not be more timely or more critical. As you know, tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030 was one of the key outcomes of the historic, most comprehensive, balanced, practical, pragmatic, and very ambitious set of outcomes adopted at COP28, known as the UAE Consensus. Tripling renewable energy capacity is not just a benchmark, it is in fact an essential enabler of all global efforts to keep 1.5 within reach, advance sustainable prosperity, and it will make sure that no one is left behind. Excellencies, friends, distinguished guests, over the last 20 years, renewable energy capacity has grown 8 times, while costs have dropped by 80%. In fact, the average cost of solar power just reached a new low of 4 cents per kilowatt hour. That is basically cheaper than many other forms of energy available today. The trends are actually moving in the right direction. They're just not moving fast enough or with the scale that is desperately needed. We urgently need to invest in 3 key areas. We must invest in grid infrastructure, AI, and the Global South. In many industrialized countries, the electricity grids are over 65 years old. And in many parts of the Global South, there are no grids at all. This is where governments must act. This is where governments must step up. All countries should include specific renewable energy and infrastructure targets in their upcoming NDCs. They should put policies in place that incentivize private investors. And they should streamline permitting, and ask someone who's been implementing renewable energy for the past 20 years, is a critical success factor. In too many places, the pace of permitting is like driving with handbrakes on, when we need to in fact be accelerating down the highway in order for us to be able to meet such ambitious targets. AI has been talked about in every single room today. AI is in fact real. AI is changing the pace of change across every industry, and AI can help unlock the 2 key challenges faced by renewable energy, and that is intermittency and storage. AI can integrate baseload and renewable energy sources to minimize emissions. It can predict peaks and dips in usage, and it can extend battery life. The faster we apply AI to the energy sector, the faster its benefits can be scaled. Friends and colleagues, the opportunity of sustainable economic prosperity through smarter, greener growth has never been greater. And time has come for us to stop perceiving the investment in renewable energy as a liability or only as a cost. In fact, it is very profitable, and we should view it as the new comprehensive, holistic, new economic development program that will ensure sustainable prosperity worldwide. Some of the worlds are not seeing a fair share of the opportunity at hand when it comes to deploying renewable energy at scale. Right now, over 120 developing countries attract less than 15% of global renewable energy investment. The international financial institutions must step up. They must shift gears, and they must make finance more available, more accessible, and more importantly, more affordable. And private finance must be incentivized through innovative blended models. The Africa Green Investment Initiative, launched last year by the UAE in partnership with our friends and colleagues in Kenya, is one example of this approach. The initiative has combined development and private capital from the UAE to target 25 projects across 14 African nations in partnership with Africa 50. Another example is Altera, the world's first catalytic private investment vehicle devoted and entirely dedicated to climate solutions. Launched at COP28, Altera's $30 billion fund has now deployed already in only 8 months $6.5 billion across mature and emerging targets, targeting 40 gigawatt of clean power. There is much more to do to fill the clean power development gap in the Global South, and I couldn't agree more with Prime Minister Motley that we are taking the necessary steps, we are taking big steps, but much more needs to happen. Here, I'd like to encourage all parties to explore all new models, all solutions, and of course, in collaboration with like-minded partners. Business as usual cannot and will not help us deliver against our ambitious goals. We need to be smart, we need to correct course, and we need to change the game. Distinguished guests, to make the advances we need in the time available, business must think differently in order for us to be able to deliver. We need a new model of engagement that will drive public and private partnership to a completely new level. We need a true spirit of solidarity that brings everyone to the table. And we need a renewed sense of positivity. Allow me to repeat. We need a renewed sense of positivity that views spending on renewables as an investment and that will bring significant returns. Being negative will get us nowhere. We will just continue to spin the wheel. Let's think positive, let's think bigger, and let's act bolder. Let's lead the race towards a cleaner, greener world, and let us act now, and let us again unite, let us act, and let us deliver. I am very much counting on the momentum of COP28 continuing on to COP29, and from there through the Troika arrangement to COP30. I thank you all for your support.
Our next speaker is the president of the upcoming COP29, Muhtar Babayev. He is presiding over COP at a critical moment in the battle against climate change. As we all know, nations are working to update their goals and raise their ambitions as they're required to in the lead up to COP30 next year in Brazil. This year, COP will rightly have a special focus on climate finance, which is a central piece of the puzzle. So we're glad to have him with us here today and looking forward to working together in the months ahead. Please welcome COP29 President Babayev.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to join you today at this critical summit. We extend our deep gratitude to the Global Renewables Alliance, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and all partners for convening us. Dear colleagues, the UE consensus at COP28 marked a significant achievement and laid a strong foundation for the work ahead. To deliver on its calls on energy transitions in a just and orderly manner, we must rapidly scale up the renewable energy systems of the future. These issues are deeply interconnected. We must now work together to put in place the enabling conditions to implement the targets of the global stocktake. The COP29 Action Agenda has placed a strong emphasis on energy, and we have developed a series of initiatives designed to accelerate the implementation of renewable energy transition based on the decisions that have been taken in Dubai. The Green Energy Zones and Corridors Declaration aims to promote investments, stimulate economic growth, and foster regional cooperation in renewable energy development. This will allow us to maximize generation in suitable areas and support cost-effective transmission over large distance and across borders. The Global Energy Storage and Grids Pledge sets an ambitious target to increase global energy storage capacity to 1.5 thousand gigawatts by 2030, 6 times above 2022 levels. It also commits to scaling up investments in grids and upgrade more than 80 million kilometers by 2040. This will be essential to ensure adequate storage capacity and the stability of grids, both of which are key enablers for the effective storage and reliable transition of renewable energy. The Hydrogen Declaration then seeks to unlock the potential of a global market for clean hydrogen and its byproducts. This will be crucial to decarbonizing hard-to-reduce sectors and developing storage solutions. As excess energy can be used to produce green hydrogen. These initiatives aim to take some of the next logical steps in the implementation of the UAE consensus. They recognize that while the cost of renewables may be fallen dramatically, we must provide further policy support to create flexible business models for a clean energy future. We therefore call upon all relevant stakeholders from the public and private sectors to endorse those declarations and send strong market signals. We must also work across both the supply and demand side of global energy markets. Within the COP29 Action Agenda, we are engaging with a range of private sector stakeholders to help them decarbonize their operations. We also know that clean energy offtake agreements can support the financing of renewable projects. To take one example, this energy demands of digital technology companies are rising rapidly. But we are convinced that the sector can play a crucial role in using digital tools for climate action and supporting the development of renewable energy. We have therefore launched the Green Digital Action Declaration, which we call on governments and the private sector to endorse. Ladies and gentlemen, these initiatives also support the COP29 presidency's wider plan to enhance ambition and enable action. To enhance ambition, we are calling all parties to submit 1.5 aligned nationally determined contributions before February 2025 deadline. These NDCs should integrate ambitious but achievable renewable energy targets. This is a critical moment to translate global targets into national action plans. To enable action, Climate finance is essential in supporting developing countries in their transition to renewable energy systems and will be centerpiece at COP29. The COP29 presidency's top negotiating priority is to negotiate a new collective quantified goal on climate finance. This goal must be fair and ambitious and adequate to meet the scale of the challenge before us. Determination and leadership are now needed from all parties to bridge the gaps that still divide us in this critical final phase.